The day my son told me, "From now on, your pension goes to my account," I remember how the world around me seemed to slow down. I heard the words clearly, but they floated in the air, detached from reason. He stood by the kitchen counter with his phone in hand, explaining that it would be easier that way, that he could help me with the bills. His tone was casual, even cheerful, like someone suggesting a new brand of coffee. But inside me, something cracked. Not loudly, not yet. Just a small, almost invisible fracture in a trust I had spent a lifetime building. My name is Helen Moore. I turned 70 last spring, though my hands look older than that. They've done the work of 3 lifetimes: nursing, cleaning, cooking, holding. I raised my son alone after his father died when he was only 10. I thought love and sacrifice were the same thing. Maybe that's where I went wrong. You teach a child to be kind, but when you give too much, they learn to take without asking. When he asked for my pension, I smiled. I told him it was fine. I even thanked him for offering to help. He looked proud of himself, like a man doing something noble. I wanted to believe it. After all, he was my boy, my only one. The house had been quiet for years, and when he started coming over every Friday with his wife, the silence felt less heavy. I cooked roast chicken, set the table with the good plates, and pretended everything was how it used to be: a mother, a son, and laughter that didn't need translation. But something about those dinners changed over time. They started arriving later, always hungry, sometimes bringing wine, sometimes not. They would eat, talk about their jobs, and scroll through their phones. When the plates were empty, they'd leave early, saying they had plans. I would stand in the doorway, waving goodbye, wondering if I had become nothing more than a warm kitchen and a full refrigerator. I told myself I was lucky. Many women my age live alone and never hear from their children. At least I had him in my life, I said. At least I mattered. But deep down, I felt the shift. The way his eyes moved when he mentioned money, the way his wife smiled when she called me mom, but avoided looking at me directly. There was a new kind of distance between us, colder than silence, sharper than anger. It was calculation. One Friday evening, I overheard them whispering in the hallway. My hearing isn't what it used to be, but I caught enough to understand. He said, "Once everything's in my account, we won't have to worry about her spending." His wife laughed softly. "She barely leaves the house. It's not like she needs much." I stood in the kitchen, holding a dish towel so tight my knuckles turned white. I didn't cry. I didn't storm in. I just kept drying the same plate until it shone like glass. That night, when they left, I sat by the window and looked at the streetlights flickering over the empty road. The neighborhood felt foreign. Even the air tasted different, thick with betrayal. When I finally went to bed, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and thought about how many hours I had worked to make sure he never went without. Double shifts at the hospital, cold meals eaten standing by the sink, every scraped knee, every science project, every whispered prayer for him to have a better life. I had given him everything, not just money, but time, youth, and dreams. Now, all he wanted was what was left of my security. I had become a mother, measured in dollars. And yet, even that night, part of me wanted to forgive him. I told myself maybe he was just stressed, maybe it was a misunderstanding, maybe love could fix it again. But there was a new voice in my head, quiet but steady. It said, "No one who truly loves you would take your dignity." It was the first time I heard it, the first time I realized that I still had choices left. If you had walked past my house that night, you'd have seen a light still on at 2 a.m. That was me, sitting by the window, realizing that silence can be its own kind of abuse. What my son didn't know was that his demand had awakened something inside me, something strong, something fierce, something that refused to be erased. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I love hearing how far these stories travel. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the blinds like nothing had changed, but I woke up different. My chest felt hollow and heavy at the same time. I moved around the kitchen, making coffee the way I always did, except now every sound, the spoon hitting the cup, the kettle's faint whistle, seemed to echo louder in the quiet house. I stared at the old calendar on the wall, the one with pictures of lighthouses, and counted the days since my son had started managing my pension. 3 months. In 3 months, I had stopped receiving bank statements. He said it was more efficient that way. My stomach twisted. That morning, I decided to walk to the bank myself. It was only 6 blocks away, and though my knees protested, I needed air, space, truth. The teller smiled politely when I handed her my ID, but her expression changed as she scrolled through the computer. "It looks like there have been several transfers," she said carefully, "and a few new accounts linked to your name." My throat went dry. I asked her to print everything. She hesitated before sliding the papers across the counter, as if she were handing me proof of a crime. Back home, I spread the pages on the table. Numbers, dates, signatures, all his handwriting. My son had opened credit cards under my name, charged them with thousands of dollars, and even paid for utilities for his own house. I read and reread every line until the ink blurred with tears. It wasn't just money. It was betrayal, printed in black and white. I sat there for hours, staring at the evidence of how far he had gone. I wanted to scream, but instead, I felt a strange calm. Maybe that's what happens when you finally see truth without excuses. I made myself a sandwich I couldn't eat, then poured it down the sink. The refrigerator hummed softly, indifferent. Late that afternoon, my neighbor Gloria knocked on my door. She was a retired teacher, the kind of woman who noticed everything without prying. "Helen, you look pale," she said. I told her everything, the pension, the fake accounts, the lies. Her eyes widened, not in pity, but in outrage. "That's financial abuse," she said. "It happens more often than you think." I didn't want to believe the word abuse applied to me. Abuse was what happened to people in news stories, not to mothers who raised their children with love. But Gloria's voice was steady. "He's taking your freedom," she said, "and you can take it back." That night, I couldn't stop hearing those words, "take it back." I sat at my small dining table, sorting through papers, adding up totals. I felt like a stranger inside my own life, someone I no longer recognized, but still had to protect. For decades, I thought strength meant endurance, staying quiet, being patient, forgiving endlessly. Now I understood that strength could also mean drawing a line and saying, "Enough." I looked at the framed photo on the mantel. My son as a boy, missing a front tooth, holding a fish he had caught with his father. I wanted to feel only love, but what I felt was grief. Not for money lost, but for the son I used to know. The boy who used to run into my arms after school was gone, replaced by a man who saw me as an account balance. Before going to bed, I called the number on one of the fraudulent credit card bills. The representative asked me security questions I couldn't answer because my son had changed them. I hung up trembling, but also more certain of what needed to come next. Tomorrow, I would start taking back what was mine. That night, for the first time in a long while, I prayed, not for my son, not for forgiveness, but for courage. When morning came, I woke before the alarm, as if my body already knew this day would change everything. I put on my old nurse's uniform, the one I hadn't worn in years, just for the feeling of strength it gave me. I looked in the mirror and whispered, "You took care of strangers through worse. You can take care of yourself now." Then I gathered every bank statement, bill, and letter into a neat stack and walked out the door. The legal aid office sat between a bakery and a barber shop in downtown Rockport. The smell of fresh bread followed me inside. The receptionist looked young enough to be my granddaughter, but when I explained my situation, her face softened into concern. "You need to speak with Attorney Daniel Rivers," she said. "He handles elder financial abuse cases." The word abuse still stung, but it no longer made me feel small. It made me angry. Daniel Rivers was kind but direct, with eyes that stayed on mine when he spoke. I told him everything: my son's request, the missing funds, the fake credit cards, the forged signatures. He took notes quietly, then said, "Mrs. Moore, what your son did is not just unethical. It's a crime, and you have every right to pursue justice." Justice. The word sounded strange in my mouth. For 70 years, I had believed that mothers were meant to forgive, to smooth things over. But sitting in that office, surrounded by papers that proved my own child had stolen from me, forgiveness felt like another form of silence. I wasn't ready for that anymore. Daniel helped me close the fraudulent accounts and file official complaints. He explained that I could recover my funds and restore my credit, but I had to stay firm. People like your son, he said gently, count on you feeling too guilty to fight back. His words sank deep, stirring both shame and relief. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't weak, I was exploited. And now, I had a choice. After leaving his office, I walked to the park nearby and sat on a bench overlooking the river. The autumn air was sharp, full of distant laughter and the smell of wet leaves. I thought about how easily love can become a weapon when used without respect. I had raised my son to be ambitious, confident, independent, never realizing he might use those same traits to control me. When I got home, I called the bank and told them to freeze every account linked to my son's name. The woman on the line hesitated. "Are you sure, ma'am?" she asked. I said, "More sure than I've been about anything in years." My hands shook when I hung up, but not from fear. It was the tremor of reclaiming something I'd almost lost, my sense of self. That evening, Gloria came over with 2 cups of chamomile tea. We sat together in silence for a while before she asked, "How does it feel?" I smiled faintly. "Like I finally opened the windows after a long winter," I said. She nodded, understanding more than words could tell. Then she added, "Now you can start thinking about what comes next." Her words lingered long after she left. What did come next? I had spent decades being needed, being dependable. Who was I when nobody depended on me anymore? For the first time, that question didn't scare me. It thrilled me. I took out an old notebook and began writing a list. Not of chores, not of bills, but of dreams I had buried long ago. Visit the ocean, learn to paint, grow lavender in the garden, live quietly but fully. As I wrote, I realized something simple but profound. Freedom isn't given, it's taken back, one decision at a time. That night, I slept with the papers still spread out on the table. Evidence of theft, yes, but also of awakening. The sound of the clock ticking in the dark didn't haunt me anymore. It felt like a promise that time, at last, was mine again. The next Friday, my son called as usual. His voice was warm, casual, pretending nothing had shifted. "Hey, Mom," he said, "we'll come by around 6. Can you make that casserole we like?" I paused, letting the silence hang long enough for him to notice. "I'm busy tonight," I answered. "You'll have to make dinner at your own house." There was confusion on the line, then irritation. "Busy with what?" he asked. I could almost hear his wife whispering something in the background. "With my life," I said, and hung up. I stood there afterward, trembling slightly. I'd never hung up on my son before. But the quiet that followed was not guilt. It was peace. For the first time in years, I didn't have to prepare a meal for people who saw me only as convenience. The kitchen smelled of freedom. That weekend, I did something small but symbolic. I listed my old furniture for sale. The dining set, the television, the armchair where my late husband used to read. I let them go one by one. Every item carried a story, but I no longer wanted a house that spoke only of the past. When the buyers came, they were polite, respectful, and left cash in my hand. Each goodbye felt lighter. By Monday, the living room was half empty. The echo of my footsteps filled the space. Strangely, I liked it that way. The emptiness felt honest. I brewed tea and sat on the floor, watching sunlight crawl across the bare walls. I realized that my son and his wife would notice the change the next time they visited. That was part of the plan. When Friday came again, they arrived without calling first. Their faces froze the moment they stepped inside. "What happened to the furniture?" my son demanded. "Where's the TV?" His wife crossed her arms. "Mom, what on earth did you do?" I smiled faintly. "I sold it," I said. "Didn't need it anymore." My son's voice rose. You did what? How are we supposed to watch the game when we come over? That question told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't worried about me. He was worried about his comfort. I folded my hands on the table. You'll have to watch at your place, I said. His wife scoffed. That's so selfish, Helen. After all we do for you? Those words stung. Selfish. I had cooked, cleaned, and shared my pension for months. I had raised a man who couldn't see the difference between love and obligation. All you do for me? I asked softly. You mean taking my money, using my name, and eating my food? He froze. His eyes darted toward his wife, searching for a cue, a defense, but she was too stunned to speak. The silence stretched between us until I finally said, You've both made yourselves comfortable in my life, but that comfort ends today. His voice shook with anger. You can't talk to me like that. I'm your son. I know exactly who you are, I replied. The question is, do you? He stormed out, muttering under his breath. His wife followed, slamming the door so hard the window rattled. I sat still for a long time, heart pounding, tea untouched on the table. But even in the stillness, I felt taller. That confrontation had cost me something. Yet it had also given me back something greater. Later that evening, Gloria came by with a casserole of her own. I heard voices, she said. Everything all right? I nodded slowly. Everything is finally starting to be. We ate together in the near-empty room, two women who had seen too much life to be fooled by appearances. When she left, I stood by the window and watched the streetlights blink on, one by one. My reflection in the glass looked older, yes, but also braver. That night, before going to bed, I whispered to the dark, I am not a mother to be managed. I am a woman to be respected. And for the first time in years, I believed it. I woke the next morning to a quiet that felt cleaner somehow. The house was stripped down to its bones, and so was I. No clutter, no pretending, just space to breathe. I made oatmeal, ate it slowly, and opened the folder where I had been keeping every piece of evidence, the statements, the letters, the copies of my son's forged signatures. I realized this folder had become something more than paperwork. It was my shield. Still, there were moments when guilt tried to crawl back in. A voice in my head whispered, He's your child. Maybe you're overreacting. Maybe you should just let it go. But that same voice had kept me silent for far too long. I pressed my hand against the table and reminded myself, dignity is not negotiable. Silence had protected him, not me. That afternoon, I decided to take a walk through town. The autumn wind carried the scent of cinnamon from the bakery and the faint chill that always hinted at winter. I saw mothers pushing strollers, couples arguing softly, teenagers laughing too loud. Ordinary life moved on, but I felt like I had stepped into a new version of it, one where I no longer lived under anyone's control. When I returned home, I sat down and wrote a letter. Not to my son, but to myself. It began, Dear Helen, you are not crazy, you are not cruel, you are not selfish for wanting peace. I wrote until my hand ached, pouring every thought I had buried for years onto paper. The exhaustion of being the dependable one, the fear of losing love, the shame of being used. By the time I finished, I realized I wasn't writing a letter of apology. I was writing a declaration of independence. That night, I went through old photographs. There were baby pictures of my son in his Halloween costumes, graduation photos, family vacations at Lake Erie. For each one, I whispered, I loved you, and I still do. But I love myself too. It wasn't bitterness I felt anymore. It was grief reshaped into understanding. Love without respect is just a wound that never heals. A few days later, Gloria invited me to her porch for tea. She asked if I had decided what to do next. I'm not sure yet, I admitted, but I know I can't pretend anymore. She nodded, then said something that would echo in my head for weeks. People think forgiveness means staying quiet. But sometimes, forgiveness is simply letting go. Of them, of the guilt, of the story they wrote for you. Her words settled deep in me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every moment where I'd said yes when I wanted to say no. every time I'd covered for his carelessness, every lie I'd told myself to protect him. By dawn, I realized something I had never dared to admit before. If I didn't stand up now, he would keep taking, not just my money, but the rest of my life. So I made a plan. I would meet with Attorney Rivers again, gather the official proof, and move forward with a case. I didn't know what that would mean for my family. I just knew I was done living as someone's convenience. Before I went to bed, I lit the small candle on my nightstand, a ritual I had kept since my husband's death. The flame danced gently, and in that glow I felt a quiet kind of courage. I whispered to myself, "This ends with me." The silence, the taking, the pretending, all of it. The house was still empty, but it no longer felt lonely. It felt alive, waiting for whatever came next. The following week began with an unexpected knock at the door. I opened it to find my son standing there, holding a box of donuts like a peace offering. His smile was too wide, his tone too light. "Hey, Mom," he said. "Can we come in?" Behind him, his wife stood with her arms folded, already scanning the half-empty living room. I hesitated, but stepped aside. He sat at the kitchen table, as if it still belonged to him. "You've been acting strange lately," he began. "We were worried. Are you feeling okay?" I poured myself coffee and ignored the question. "I'm fine," I said, "but I've been looking at my bank accounts." The color drained slightly from his face, but he forced a laugh. "Oh, that. I told you I was just helping organize things." "You're getting older, Mom. It's easy to make mistakes." It wasn't what he said that hurt the most. It was the way he said it. Patient, practiced, patronizing. The way you'd talk to someone you've already decided can't understand. His wife added quickly, "You know, we're just trying to help you. You shouldn't stress about money." I placed the coffee cup down slowly. "I'm not stressed," I said. "I'm informed." For a moment, there was silence, heavy and electric. Then I slid the folder across the table. "These are the statements, the forged signatures, the cards opened in my name." He blinked, the smile slipping. "Where did you get these?" "From the bank," I said, "and from my attorney." His voice sharpened. "You went to a lawyer? Are you serious?" "As serious as the debt you put in my name." He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "You're overreacting, Mom. You're confused. Maybe you forgot signing some things. It happens." The gaslighting hit like a wave. Familiar, practiced, cruel. But this time, it didn't stick. I looked him straight in the eye. "I may forget my keys, but I don't forget betrayal." His wife shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe we should just go," she whispered, but he ignored her. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me?" he shouted. "For me?" I said quietly. "You mean for yourself. You used my name, my money, my trust, and you call that helping." He stood, pacing the floor. "You're being dramatic. Nobody's stealing anything." I rose too, my hands steady now. "Then you won't mind that I've already filed a report." His head snapped up. "What did you just say?" "I filed a report with the bank and the authorities," I repeated calmly. "There's a lawyer representing me now." The silence that followed was unlike any I'd known. It wasn't fearful. It was freeing. His face twisted between shock and disbelief, the arrogance draining from him in slow motion. His wife grabbed her purse. "Let's go," she said sharply, and for once I saw a flash of something in her eyes. Shame, maybe, or realization. He pointed a finger at me as he backed toward the door. "You'll regret this, Mom," he said. "No," I replied. I already regretted staying quiet. When the door closed, I sat down, every muscle trembling. The house felt different again, larger somehow. I looked around at the bare walls and empty shelves and realized that emptiness wasn't a loss anymore. It was a beginning. That evening, I called Gloria and told her what had happened. "You did the right thing," she said. "He needed to know that your silence wasn't free." I thanked her, though part of me still ached. No mother dreams of standing against her own child. But I also knew that love without boundaries becomes a kind of prison. That night, As I lay in bed, I whispered, "I forgive him, but I won't protect him anymore." For the first time in a long while, sleep came easily. Days passed quietly after the confrontation, but the silence no longer felt like absence. It was recovery. I stopped waiting for the phone to ring. Each morning, I brewed coffee, opened the curtains wide, and let the sun fill the space he used to occupy with noise and control. The stillness was healing me, one breath at a time. On the third morning, there was a letter in my mailbox, my name handwritten, the envelope thick. Inside was a note from the credit company confirming that several fraudulent accounts had been frozen. Attached was a short letter from Attorney Rivers. "Progress takes courage, Helen. Keep every record safe and remember, justice has its own rhythm." I read that line over and over, tracing it with my finger. Justice, such a small word to hold so much hope. Gloria stopped by that afternoon with fresh bread and a gentle smile. She had become my anchor in all this. Steady, honest, the kind of friend who listened without pity. "You look stronger," she said. I laughed softly. Maybe I'm just less afraid. We sat on the porch together, eating bread still warm from her oven. She asked, "Do you think he'll try to reach out again?" I looked toward the street, empty and quiet, and said, "If he does, I'll answer. But on my terms." That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I cooked dinner just for myself. No extra plates, no forced conversation. I made baked salmon and roasted vegetables, set the table with one plate and one candle. Eating alone used to feel like loneliness. Now it felt like freedom measured in peace and silence. I realized how long I had lived performing comfort for others, never giving any to myself. Later that night, I pulled out the old box of letters my husband had written to me before he passed. His handwriting was uneven, but his words were gentle. One letter said, "If life ever hurts too much, remember who you were before the pain." I held that letter to my chest. I remembered that woman, hopeful, capable, fiercely alive. I wanted to meet her again. The next morning, I got dressed with purpose. A navy blouse, comfortable shoes, my old pearl earrings. When I arrived at Attorney Rivers' office, he smiled as if expecting me. "I was just reviewing your file," he said. "You have a solid case." Hearing that brought a wave of mixed emotions: pride, sorrow, relief. I had proof of everything: the stolen funds, the forged signatures, the lies. But I also had to face the truth that my own son was now a defendant in my pursuit of justice. "I don't want to destroy him," I said quietly. "I just want him to stop destroying me." Rivers nodded. "Then we'll focus on recovery, financial, emotional, and legal." When I left his office, I felt lighter. The fall air brushed against my face like a promise. I walked to the park and sat on the same bench where I had cried weeks before. Only this time, I smiled. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for someone to rescue me. I was rescuing myself. That evening, I started journaling again. I wrote about courage, not the loud kind, but the quiet, steady courage that wakes up every morning and chooses to start over. I wrote that love isn't measured by how much we endure, but by how clearly we see our own worth. Before bed, I stood by the window, watching the moon cast silver light over the bare living room. The shadows no longer frightened me. They simply reminded me of what I had survived. I whispered softly, "You took my trust, but not my strength." And somehow, saying it out loud made it true. The following week brought a mixture of calm and courage I hadn't felt in years. The papers were filed, the evidence secure, and the world outside my window looked clearer, sharper, as if every tree and building had been waiting for me to finally see them. I found myself moving slower, but with purpose, like someone learning how to live again after a long illness. On Tuesday, Attorney Rivers called. His tone was calm but firm. "Helen, your son's attorney reached out. They're aware of the complaint." My heart skipped. "And?" "They want to discuss a settlement before this becomes public," he said. "But the choice is yours. You can keep it private or you can make it official through the courts." I sat in silence, staring at the sunlight on the kitchen counter. Private would be easier, quieter. But private also meant hidden, and hidden was where all the abuse had lived. "No," I said slowly. "Let it be public. Let the truth stand in the open." Rivers didn't sound surprised. "Then we'll proceed," he said gently. "It takes courage to do what you're doing, Helen. Most people never do." After the call, I sat down at the table with my cup of tea. The house around me felt different, no longer a scene of loss, but a witness to rebirth. I thought of all the women I had met in the hospital during my nursing years, women who endured in silence because they thought love excused cruelty. I used to tell them to take their medication, to rest, to heal. Now, I finally understood the medicine they needed was permission. Permission to stop apologizing for protecting themselves. That afternoon, Gloria came over with her knitting bag. She asked how things were progressing, and I told her about my decision. She stopped knitting mid-stitch. "That's brave," she said. "You're choosing truth over comfort." I smiled faintly. "I'm choosing myself." We spent the rest of the afternoon talking about everything except the case, her garden, the neighbor's new puppy, the small joys that remind you life goes on. It felt good to laugh again, even softly. When she left, she placed her hand on my shoulder. "If you ever need someone to stand beside you in court, you know where I'll be." That simple offer carried more strength than any promise. As the days went by, I began to notice how light my body felt when it wasn't carrying fear. I started waking up early again, going for walks by the river, waving to strangers. My mind no longer looped around regret or blame. Instead, it searched for what came next. One afternoon, I passed by a small community center and saw a sign in the window, "Senior Writing Group. Thursdays at 2. I stopped, smiled, and made a note to go. Maybe it was time to share my story, not just for me, but for others who thought silence was the same as love. That night, I sat in bed with the folder on my lap. It no longer frightened me. It was simply part of the record of who I had been, the woman who was betrayed, who broke, who began again. I thought about my son, wherever he was. I didn't wish him harm. I just wished him clarity, the kind that comes too late but still teaches something. Before turning off the light, I whispered into the darkness, "You can't steal what I've reclaimed." And with that, I slept soundly, dreaming not of revenge, but of a horizon filled with soft light and the sound of waves. When the court date finally arrived, the morning was cool and bright. I wore a simple gray dress and the same pearl earrings I had worn to my wedding decades earlier. They reminded me of the woman who once believed in forever, and in a strange way I still did. But now I believed in a forever that included myself. Gloria met me outside the courthouse steps, her scarf fluttering in the wind. She squeezed my hand and said, "Whatever happens, you've already won." Inside, the air smelled of paper and coffee. The walls were beige, the kind of neutral color meant to calm people who rarely felt calm. My son was already there with his lawyer. He didn't look up when I entered, just stared at his phone like a child hiding behind a screen. For a moment, my heart softened. Not because I forgave him yet, but because I remembered the boy he used to be. The one who used to reach for my hand when crossing the street. I wondered when that boy had disappeared. Attorney Rivers guided me to my seat and whispered, "You'll only need to speak if the judge asks." I nodded, holding my breath as the proceedings began. The judge reviewed the evidence, the statements, the forged signatures, the trail of deceit so carefully documented it left no room for denial. Every page was a mirror reflecting what I had survived. When the judge asked if I had anything to say, I stood slowly. My voice trembled at first, but steadied as I spoke. "I never wanted to be here," I said. No mother does. But when love is used as a weapon, silence becomes a wound that never heals. I am not here to punish. I am here to protect the little dignity I have left, and maybe in doing so, remind my son that respect is not optional. The courtroom fell silent. Even my son looked up for the first time, eyes wide, expression unreadable. I sat down, heart pounding but lighter than I had felt in years. The judge took a moment before responding. "Mrs. Moore," he said, "your strength is commendable. This court recognizes that financial exploitation, particularly within families, is a profound form of abuse. You deserve protection." Then he turned to my son. "And you, sir, owe your mother far more than money." The decision came quickly after that. He was ordered to repay every dollar he had stolen, plus restitution and legal fees. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I simply breathed. The law had done its part. The healing would be mine to finish. Outside the courthouse, Gloria hugged me tightly. "How do you feel?" she asked. I thought about it for a long moment. "Empty," I said, "but in a good way, like I finally made space for peace." We went to a small diner nearby, the kind with cracked vinyl booths and kind waitresses. I ordered pancakes and coffee. When the waitress brought the check, Gloria teased, "Don't let anyone else pay this one." I laughed for the first time in weeks, a deep, real laugh that startled even me. That evening, as I sat by the window, I realized the hardest part wasn't the legal battle. It was learning to live without the illusion that love alone could fix everything. My son had made his choices, and I had made mine. Before going to bed, I walked into the living room, now bare but bright. I whispered to the empty space, "You didn't win, and neither did I. But I'm free." And in that quiet house, freedom was enough. The following days drifted by like a soft tide. The legal battle was over, but the silence afterward was its own kind of trial. Every corner of the house reminded me of something he had touched, borrowed, or broken, not just objects, but trust. Still, there was relief in the air, like a wound that had finally been cleaned, even if it still stung. Attorney Rivers called to confirm the final paperwork. "You'll receive the first restitution payment within 2 weeks," he said. "After that, the rest will be scheduled monthly." His tone carried a quiet satisfaction, but I could hear his caution too. "You may feel empty for a while, Helen. Justice doesn't erase grief." "I know," I said softly, "but at least now I can grieve without guilt." After we hung up, I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the last of the autumn leaves drift across the yard. I thought about how strange it felt to live without waiting for someone to knock, to text, to call with new demands disguised as concern. I had spent so many years reacting to other people's needs that stillness felt revolutionary. That afternoon, Gloria stopped by with her knitting bag again. She had become my ritual, a cup of tea, gentle talk, the sound of her needles clicking in rhythm with my breath. "So, what now?" she asked. "What will you do with this new freedom?" I smiled faintly. "I'm not sure yet. I'm still learning how to spend a day without apology." She chuckled. "Then start small. Buy yourself something beautiful, something no one else can take." The next morning, I did exactly that. I went downtown, wandered into a small thrift store, and found a painting, a quiet seascape in soft blues and grays. The waves seemed to move when I looked at them, calm and endless. I bought it without hesitation and hung it in the living room where the television used to be. For the first time, I liked what filled that space. Later that week, I joined the writing group I'd seen at the community center. The room smelled of coffee and paper, and there were 6 of us, all older, all carrying stories heavy with time. When it was my turn to read, my voice trembled. I didn't name names or mention money. I just read a short piece titled "Mother as Bank Machine." When I finished, the room was silent, not from discomfort, but from recognition. One woman reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I know that story," she said quietly. Walking home afterward, I felt a warmth I hadn't felt in years, the kind that comes when your pain becomes useful. The streetlights blinked on, one by one, lighting my path home. That night, I stood before the seascape painting and whispered, "This is mine." I thought of all the years I had tried to earn love by giving everything away. Now, I understood that real love begins when you stop handing out pieces of yourself to people who don't know how to hold them. Before bed, I wrote in my journal, "Freedom doesn't arrive like thunder. It comes quietly, with tea, with laughter, with a single painting on an empty wall." I closed the notebook, turned off the light, And for the first time, I didn't dream about the past. I dreamed about a shoreline and a horizon with no end in sight. Winter crept in gently that year, brushing the town with cold wind and pale skies. My life settled into a rhythm I hadn't known in decades. Slow mornings, warm tea, long walks to the market where people greeted me by name. I was learning to live on my own terms, but healing, I discovered, was not a straight road. Some days I woke up proud. Other days, guilt whispered at the edges of my peace. On one of those gray mornings, as I folded laundry, I found an old photo tucked in a drawer. My son, at 6 years old, wearing a paper crown he made in school. In his handwriting at the bottom, he had scrawled, "For Mom, Queen of Everything." I sat on the bed, holding that picture for a long time. My heart softened and hurt at the same time. How did that little boy grow into someone who saw me as a resource instead of a refuge? I whispered into the stillness. Where did we lose each other? That evening, I attended the writing group again. The theme for the week was forgiveness. When my turn came, I read a short passage I had written the night before. Forgiveness, I said, is not erasing what happened. It's letting go of the version of love that hurt you. When I finished, an older man across the table wiped his eyes. My son hasn't spoken to me in 10 years, he said quietly. Maybe I needed to hear that. On my way home, snow began to fall. The town shimmered under the streetlights, quiet and soft. I walked slowly, letting the flakes rest on my coat like small blessings. For the first time, I didn't feel broken by what I had lost. I felt grateful for what I had reclaimed. The following day brought another letter from Attorney Rivers, this time confirming that all restitution had been received and my credit restored. I stared at the final line. Case closed. I traced those 2 words with my fingertip. Case closed. But hearts, I thought, never really close. They heal around the hurt, like a scar that remembers but no longer bleeds. That afternoon, Gloria came by with her usual smile. We made soup and shared quiet conversation. She looked at me and said, "You know, you don't owe anyone an explanation for choosing yourself." I laughed softly. I think I finally believe that. Later, I sat by the window and watched children throwing snowballs down the street. The sound of their laughter carried through the glass, bright and innocent. I wondered if my son remembered laughter that pure. I hoped he did. That night, I lit my candle again and opened my journal. I wrote, "I still love my son, but love no longer means surrender. It means wishing him clarity while keeping my peace intact." I signed it with my full name, as if reclaiming my identity one last time. Before going to bed, I took the photograph of my son as a boy and placed it inside the journal. Not hidden, but safe. Part of my story, not my burden. I whispered, "I forgive you, but I belong to myself now." The snow outside kept falling, soft and endless, wrapping the world in quiet mercy. And for the first time since all of this began, I didn't dream about loss. I dreamed about beginnings. Spring arrived with a hush, as if even the earth wanted to move gently after such a long, bruising winter. The air smelled faintly of rain and lilac. I found myself drawn to small things again. Fresh bread, morning light, the sound of birds at the window. Healing had stopped feeling like work. It was just life returning in quieter colors. One morning, as I sat on the porch with my tea, a car slowed in front of my house. My heart stuttered before my mind caught up. It was my son's car. I hadn't seen it in months. He parked, sat for a moment, then stepped out slowly. He looked thinner, older, like someone who had been carrying too many unspoken things. I stayed seated, my fingers tightening around the cup. He approached the porch steps and stopped a few feet away. "Mom," he said softly. The words sounded smaller than I remembered. "Can we talk?" I gestured toward the second chair but said nothing. He sat, hands trembling slightly. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," he began. "For everything, for what I did. I know I can't fix it, but I didn't know what else to do but come here." His voice cracked. "I was angry at the world, and I took it out on you. I thought I deserved what was yours because I was your son. I was wrong. I let the silence stretch. The apology hung in the air, fragile but real. I could see the shame in his eyes, and for a fleeting moment I glimpsed that boy in the paper crown again. You hurt me deeply, I said finally. Not just with the money, but with the lies. I raised you to be kind. I don't know what happened to that kindness, but I hope you find it again. He nodded, tears glistening. I've started therapy, he said quietly, and I paid back everything I owed. But I still don't know how to make it right. You can start, I said, by not expecting forgiveness to mean forgetfulness. He looked down, then whispered, I understand. We sat there a long time, listening to the wind moving through the trees. The conversation wasn't a reunion. It was an ending shaped like understanding. Before leaving, he said, I'm glad you're okay. I nodded but didn't stand. Some distances are meant to remain. When he drove away, I stayed on the porch until the sound of his engine faded completely. The ache in my chest wasn't bitterness anymore. It was release. I realized that closure doesn't arrive with grand gestures. It comes in moments like this, quiet, honest, human. That evening, Gloria stopped by with lemon pie. Was that your son I saw earlier? She asked. I nodded. He apologized, I said. And I listened. She smiled gently. That's enough. Later, as I washed the dishes, I felt tears slip down my cheeks, not of pain, but of peace. I thought about how many women never reach this point, trapped in cycles of guilt and silence. I whispered to the empty kitchen, You're allowed to protect yourself and still have a heart. Before bed, I wrote in my journal, Today my son said, sorry. I didn't need it to move on, but it helped close a door I'd been afraid to shut. I added a final line. Freedom doesn't always roar. Sometimes it sighs. The night air was soft through the open window, carrying the faint scent of lilac. I turned off the lamp, feeling both heavy and light, like someone who had finally set down the past. A few weeks later, I found myself driving toward the coast, a quiet impulse that turned into a plan. I wanted to see the ocean again, the place where my husband and I had once walked hand in hand, talking about futures that no longer existed. I hadn't been back since his passing, and I didn't realize until that drive how much I missed the sound of the waves. The road stretched wide and empty, the radio humming softly. I thought about everything that had unfolded, the deception, the confrontation, the courtroom, the apology. It felt distant now, like another lifetime. The pain had dulled, replaced by something steadier, gratitude for having survived myself. When I reached the coast, the air was cool and clean. The sea glittered under a pale blue sky, endless and forgiving. I parked, slipped off my shoes, and walked toward the water. Each wave curled toward me, touched my toes, and retreated, as if greeting me without questions. I sat on the sand and breathed. For the first time, I felt entirely unobserved, unneeded, and completely alive. I took a notebook from my bag and began to write. I didn't write about the betrayal or the money. I wrote about rediscovery, how losing what I thought defined me had given me the space to find who I truly was. The words flowed easily, honest and unfiltered. Freedom is not revenge, I wrote. It's waking up one day and realizing you no longer wish for anyone else's permission to be happy. When the sun began to sink, painting the horizon in orange and gold, I thought about my husband again. I imagined him smiling at me, proud of the woman I had become. I whispered, I kept my promise. I didn't give up. The wind carried the words out to sea. On the drive back, I stopped at a small cafe overlooking the harbor. The waitress was about my age, with silver hair tied neatly behind her head. She asked if I was traveling alone. Yes, I said, smiling, but not lonely. She nodded as if she understood exactly what that meant. When I returned home, I felt something inside me shift again, not a sharp turn, but a quiet settling. The house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt earned. I walked from room to room, touching the walls, as if blessing them for their patience. In the living room, the seascape painting caught the last bit of sunlight, and for a second, the painted water seemed to move. I sat in front of it and wrote another journal entry. Peace is not forgetting. Peace is remembering without hurting. Later that night, Gloria called just to check in. I told her about the ocean, the cafe, the quiet joy of being alone without loneliness. "You sound different," she said warmly, like someone who finally came home. "I think I did," I replied. Before going to bed, I stood by the open window and watched the moon rise above the street. My heart no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt like a house with every door open to light and air. I realized then that justice had not only restored my finances, it had restored my soul. And with that peace came the simplest truth of all. I hadn't just survived my son's betrayal. I had outgrown it. Summer arrived like a quiet visitor, unannounced and full of light. The garden behind my house had come alive again, bursting with wildflowers that I hadn't planted. Gloria joked that even the earth was celebrating my new life. I spent mornings tending to the small lavender patch near the porch, the air heavy with the scent of renewal. My hands, once trembling from anxiety, now moved with certainty. Every root I pressed into the soil felt like a promise kept to myself. One afternoon, Attorney Rivers called to confirm the final paperwork. The settlement had been paid in full. "You're officially free of any legal ties to your son's financial actions," he said. "Your record is spotless." I thanked him quietly, not for the money, but for giving me the chance to reclaim my name. After we hung up, I stood in the middle of the kitchen and whispered, "Spotless." It was the first time in years I'd felt entirely clean. Later that week, I received another letter, this one from my son. I hesitated before opening it, afraid that words on a page might undo the peace I'd built. But curiosity and compassion won. The letter was short, handwritten. He wrote that he was working part-time again, trying to rebuild his life. He didn't ask for forgiveness, only hoped I was doing well. There was no manipulation, no excuses, just a quiet acknowledgement of distance. I folded the letter and placed it in the same journal that held my earlier entries. Not as a wound, but as a record of how far both of us had come. Love, I realized, didn't have to return to its old shape to remain real. Sometimes, love was simply wishing someone well from a safe distance. That weekend, Gloria and I drove to a nearby farmer's market. We laughed like girls, tasting honey samples and buying more peaches than we needed. She said, "You're glowing, Helen. I think freedom suits you." I smiled. "It's not freedom," I said. "It's peace." When I got home, I walked into the living room, still warm from the afternoon sun. The seascape painting shimmered faintly under the light. I remembered the first time I hung it, how it had filled an empty wall that once symbolized loss. Now, it represented everything I had built on my own. I took a deep breath and made a decision. I would sell the house and move closer to the ocean. The idea didn't come from loneliness, but from desire, the same kind that makes a bird take flight because it finally remembers it has wings. That night, I called Gloria to tell her. She laughed. "Then I guess I'll have to visit you by the shore." I said, "Bring your knitting needles. We'll sit by the water and make something beautiful out of the rest of our lives." After the call, I began packing small boxes, books, photos, keepsakes, but only what mattered. Each item that went into the box felt like a goodbye to the years of endurance. I was ready for a life built not from duty, but from choice. Before going to bed, I wrote my final entry in that journal. "Tomorrow, I'll look at houses by the sea. Not to escape, but to begin again." I closed the book, set it on the nightstand, and turned off the lamp. Outside, a soft summer wind rustled the leaves, carrying the scent of lavender through the open window. I lay there smiling, knowing that tomorrow would not be about running away. It would be about walking forward, with my dignity intact, my heart steady, and the quiet strength of someone who had finally learned that self-respect is the truest kind of love. The morning I left my old house, the sun rose in a golden hush. Everything smelled of summer and new beginnings. The moving truck waited at the curb, its doors open like arms ready to carry what little I chose to keep. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, looking around the now empty rooms. The walls that had once absorbed my silence now echoed back only peace. Gloria arrived with a basket of muffins and tears already in her eyes. "You sure you don't want me to come along?" she asked. I smiled and hugged her. "You've carried me long enough. It's time I carry myself." She laughed through her tears. "Then promise me one thing. Send me a picture when you see the ocean." "I will," I said. "You'll know I made it." The drive to the coast was slow and steady. Every mile felt like a small release. The highway stretched out in front of me, lined with fields and scattered towns, each one fading behind as I moved closer to the life I had always imagined, but never believed I deserved. By noon, the smell of salt filled the air. The horizon opened wide, blue and endless. When I arrived at the small coastal cottage I had purchased, a white house with peeling shutters and a wraparound porch, I felt a kind of calm I hadn't known in decades. It wasn't grand, but it was mine. The realtor handed me the keys, and when I turned them in the lock, it sounded like a new heartbeat. Inside, sunlight poured through the windows. I placed the seascape painting on the mantel, where it belonged, facing the real ocean just beyond the dunes. Then I brewed tea, walked barefoot outside, and stood in the sand. The ocean roared softly, powerful, yet forgiving. I whispered to the wind, "I made it." For a while, I simply stood there, letting the tide wash over my feet, carrying away the last traces of bitterness. I realized that life hadn't given me the ending I expected. It had given me something better, the power to start again. That evening, I sat on the porch and watched the sunset turn the water into gold. I thought of my husband, of my son, of all the versions of myself I had been, the caretaker, the provider, the silent one, the survivor. Each of them had brought me here. As darkness settled, I wrote my first entry in a new journal. This is not a story of loss, but of reclamation. I once believed freedom came from being needed. Now I know it comes from choosing peace over permission. I closed the notebook, feeling the rhythm of the waves beneath the stillness of night. Somewhere behind me, my old life was finally letting go. And as I sat there, barefoot on my porch by the sea, I whispered to the stars, "I am free." There are moments in life when survival feels like the only goal, when every breath is a quiet negotiation between fear and hope. But looking back now, I understand that surviving was never the end of my story. Living was. In the months that followed my move to the coast, I learned the difference between solitude and loneliness. I woke up each day to the sound of waves instead of worry. I cooked simple meals, wrote in my journal, and sometimes took long walks along the shoreline, collecting seashells shaped like hearts. I wasn't searching for meaning anymore. I was living inside it. Every so often, my son sends a letter. They are short, thoughtful, and free of expectation. I write back, not to reopen the past, but to acknowledge that we both grew from it. I no longer need his approval, and he no longer holds my silence. That, I've realized, is its own kind of reconciliation. Imperfect, but peaceful. Gloria visits once a month. She always brings stories from Rockport, updates on neighbors, and her favorite lavender cookies. We sit on the porch and talk about everything from the weather to the wonder of second chances. Sometimes, when the sun dips low and the ocean turns silver, we fall quiet together. Two women who learned that dignity is not given, it's reclaimed. The cottage has become a place of quiet justice. The walls hold laughter now, not lies. My hands, once tired from carrying the weight of everyone else's needs, are busy with gentler things, tending to flowers, writing stories, pouring tea. I've learned that freedom isn't loud. It's calm, steady, and full of choice. If someone had told me years ago that my greatest act of love would be walking away, I wouldn't have believed them. But I see it clearly now. Love without respect becomes control, and control disguised as care is just another kind of abuse. By choosing myself, I didn't abandon my family. I ended a cycle that had stolen generations of women's peace before me. There's a phrase I keep taped above my desk. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision that something else matters more. Every morning I read it, then step outside to face the ocean. The waves keep coming, sometimes fierce, sometimes tender, and I welcome each one as proof that movement and healing never stop. So to anyone listening to my story, I want to say this. No matter how long you've lived in silence, it's never too late to choose your own voice, protect your dignity, set your limits. Love yourself enough to walk away from what diminishes you, because peace, once you claim it, is the most loyal companion you'll ever have. If this story touched your heart, please like the video and subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the next one. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? Your support helps keep these voices alive. And if you are ready for another powerful journey, click the story appearing on your screen right now. See you in the next life story with love and respect.